he shouldn't have said it the way he said it. That was not the way to handle that.
Sounded a little arrogant,
On a coach's show, after you get pistol whipped, you probably shouldn't ask for NIL money. Nick, the people listed in the coach's show, probably not the people giving a lot of NIL money either.
Right.
Because the people giving big NIL money can get one-on-one.
They're going to practices, right?
Or fundraisers or whatever. So that was just it was a dig he should not have taken there, in my opinion. And he did kind of like, you weren't paying attention if you thought that he wasn't taking any fault for the loss. He took it on the chin in the post game. He took it on the chin on Monday's press conference. You just weren't paying attention if you thought that that's what his overall message was. Right. And I think his NIL comments, I don't necessarily agree with them 100%. Nick, I could strike oil out here in Mount Washington, and I could become the richest man in the universe.
Yep.
And I could give all this money to Kentucky. I could make Kentucky the new Oregon. The Georgia Bulldogs would still get better players than the Kentucky roster I would help create. There's no getting around that. Like that, but that is just where Kentucky is, just on the food chain. There's nothing you can do about that.
It's 100 years of success and program pedigree, national championships. Like
if I was a billionaire, what I would do is I would probably make an IMG Academy here. So Kentucky would have a better chance to get players, but those players would come from somewhere else.
Right.
Like there's only so much you can do from that aspect. You brought up a great point. Just watch at the stadium. The starting lineup is Watkinsville, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, McDonough, Georgia. It's on Cartersville, Georgia, Chatsworth, Georgia,
Columbus.
Yeah, it's on and on and on. They're just in the backyard there. So that is something Kentucky has to fight against all the time. So I didn't agree with that statement that Stoops had, and that's why I felt like it was a dig, because I know he knows that too. He was just taking a little dig there. I didn't feel that way, and I don't want to single out Jason here because he's the one who had the cojones to call in on the call-in show, and
but a ton of people shared that stat.
But I hear that stat, and just overall, there's a bunch of angst about the program that is kind of unfounded to me in a lot of different ways. And that's what I kind of want to get into here. All right. Let's talk about this stat, this winning record stat. This is a stat that fan bases that don't like your team use to discredit something you're doing on the field.
It's like when in the offseason, when Locke and like the U of L sports radio hacks start like, Kentucky don't play nobody. They don't beat nobody. And it's like, well, this isn't an NCAA tournament. You don't need to build up a resume. You beat who you play.
I'm going to tell you, Nick, Kentucky has gone 5-3 twice in our lifetime at football.
Yep.
Both those teams were 10-3 and legit top 15 teams at the end of the year.
It's pretty good.
So what you're upset about is he's essentially, and then here's why else is a flawed stat. One of those teams is South Carolina, who was like a top 40 team that year. They just took advantage of a bad SEC. So you're saying that's a better win than you're not they beat Penn State, top 15 Penn State team. That doesn't matter. They beat the rival with their Heisman Trophy quarterback, kept them out of the Orange Bowl. We didn't beat an SEC team that went 5-3. Don't care. It's a stupid stat, and you're crediting these your rivals who just try to make a dig at you online.
Yeah.
It's a silly barometer to have. If you want to criticize them, there's room for criticism. There's a lot of things you can criticize on. Number one, offense.
Yeah.
That is the number one. If you're going to criticize Stoops and if you're going to complain about them not getting to the next level, that is the ultimate criticism. They've had one quarterback that have totaled 30 touchdowns in a single season since he's been here. They haven't had a 3,000-yard passer yet. Getting a 3,000-yard passer should not be hard. That's something a good program like Kentucky should do every couple of years. They can't do it ever. That is the criticism. And when you get upset at this and you think they're hitting a hard ceiling,
it's because they don't have a quarterback. You have to have a quarterback.
That should be your number one criticism. And I'm getting a lot of they play prevent defense. And that is to me, that's a load of crap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They play to their strengths on defense. They play to their recruiting background on defense. Like, how many times has Maxwell Harrison been like one-on-one with a guy this year? Like, whether he's playing off cover 3 or they're in cover 1 or they're pattern matching or whatever. And I just get sick of that they throw that out there all the time. That is like Kentucky's playing good. They're playing good enough defense to do what you want them to do.
People call it prevent defense if you just line up and if you aren't playing bump and run coverage. Which, like, if you want Kentucky to play bump and run man coverage, like, you don't want to see that. Did you see what Bo Pelini did to Mississippi State? And
this
they just
ran
meshes all day. Yeah,
this
exactly.
This is not Madden. This isn't EA Sports. Okay.
The funny thing about the offense, I wanted to mention too. I was doing some research, scrolling through stats. I was like, because this game could be a high scoring one, like it. I was like, how many times has Kentucky played in the 30s with both teams? It's been like 5 times since 2016 or 17. So 5 times in like 7 years where both teams have gotten to the 30s. They don't get a lot of shootouts because they don't have the offensive firepower to get into shootouts.
And that's where I think the criticism lies. Like, you have to eventually make that transition.
Yeah.
And I think another criticism is you've had Levis and Leary these last 3 years. Change of coordinators, obviously. Why in your structure or your organization, why are they not performing to their peak powers?
Yep.
That is the ultimate criticism to me. What is going on with how you operate as an offense that you cannot get this thing really juiced up and rolling? That is the criticism. But, Nick, there's been a lot of angst in the last year, really, I think, since they lost to Vanderbilt with this fan base. Even this season when they were winning games, there was always a didn't do this, didn't do that, didn't win pretty enough, yada, yada, yada. Now, I'll say this. It is good to have a portion of your fan base triggered because that keeps everyone on their toes. Yeah, like, it helps help prevent complacency. But we also need to realize, like, where Kentucky is and what the goal should be. I think in 2018, I think people finally came around on the idea that Kentucky could win the East and that it could happen. You saw Missouri did it. You saw South Carolina did it. You saw some bad Florida teams win it, all in that kind of 2013 to 2017 range. And then 2010 through 17, that window, you saw all the – but you didn't have a souped-up Florida. You didn't have a souped-up Georgia.
Or souped-up Tennessee,
Or souped-up Tennessee.
Yeah.
And then right when Kentucky gets good enough where they can really land the punch and get there, Georgia becomes the best they've ever been. This is the best 5-year, 6-year run Georgia's ever been on. And they are a freaking rocket ship. They could three-peat. I mean,